I made a post a while ago about a drug that's been circulating around my town. I've been recently learned some new things, and I thought I should update everybody on what's been happening. This isn't so much a confession anymore as it is a PSA. If you ever come across a coarse, bluish powder, interlaced with small sparkles, please contact me. For anyone who may not be caught up, there's this new drug in my town with some truly horrific effects. They call it Starlight. People say it's an extremely powerful hallucinogenic drug, but recent events have led me to believe that it's much more than that. My 3 friends tried this drug about 2 weeks ago. 2 of them, Daniel and Griffey, are now both dead. As for the third one, Aaron, well, I don't even know how to explain it. When I last posted, I had just had a conversation with a cop about this local guy who had seemingly been devoured right in front of him. Whatever force or entity that had done it appeared entirely invisible from the officer's perspective. The officer was obviously quite shaken by it, and the only reason that he told me about it at all was because I had seen something similar happen to my friend Daniel. This is no longer just an isolated incident. Over the past few days, I had become privy to a few other cases. Officer Smith, which isn't his real name, has continued sharing information with me. I'm pretty sure he's risking his job by doing it, but people in the town are scared. No news outlet is reporting on this, and dozens of unmarked black vans have been patrolling the town for days now. No one knows who they are, or what agency they are with, but it's clear that they don't want this to get out. The police are currently investigating a house party from last weekend. Several people that were there have since been reported missing. From interviewing others at the party, they soon learned that the aforementioned Starlight was present. 2 attendees that were reported to have taken the drug were the brothers, David and Marcus. The older brother David has yet to be found, but the younger brother Marcus was discovered at a local reservoir. Cops found him there after someone had called and reported hysterical laughter in the early morning. Marcus was completely naked, and in the first stages of hypothermia when they found him. He was brought to the local hospital and was clearly not in the right state of mind. Cops asked him if he had taken the Starlight substance, but he never confirmed one way or the other. It was pretty apparent that he was on something heavy though. "He's friends with the water," Marcus replied when he was asked about his brother. They didn't get much else out of him. The police took his cryptic message to mean that David had entered the reservoir when they found Marcus. They brought in a dive team to search, but so far they haven't found anything. Now keep in mind, this reservoir is not very big, only about a mile in circumference and maybe 40 feet deep at the most. The only animals present are small rock bass and maybe a few trout. If his body is in there, they definitely should have found it by now. There was another incident involving a 19-year-old girl named Destiny. Destiny was a heroin addict who had checked into a local motel. After she had exceeded her stay time, the staff went in to check on her. What they found is yet to be explained. A couple pieces of the woman were found. A severed, slightly bloodied foot by the door, and a single fingertip in the bed. There was very little blood in the room at all, especially compared with what one would expect from amputating a foot. Most curious of all, however, was the partial hand. A single human hand was discovered embedded in the motel wall. The pinky and ring finger were absent, and the hand appeared molded into the wall itself. The way Officer Smith described it was like it had been fused with the wall. They managed to remove it, only to discover that it had no backside. The other 2 fingers were not in the wall or anywhere else to be found. They have yet to hear anybody's explanation for that. It was thought at first that the poor girl was the victim of some horrific attack. Maybe a serial killer, even an animal as unlikely as that sounds. But then the police found her stash, In her possession were several tablets of 20 milligram Oxycontin. At least that's what they thought they were at first. The pills were not pharmaceutical grade, but they were stamped by somebody who knew what they were doing. They're still waiting on the test results, but they believe that the pills were cut with something. The cops are still searching for the supplier, but you know how those things go. The finding was very troubling though, as it lends credence to the idea that somebody is intentionally mixing Starlight with other narcotics, not just one type either. If you remember back to my previous post, you'll recall that the guy who was killed in front of Officer Smith had unintentionally ingested Starlight after it had been cut into his cocaine. I'd be willing to bet that whoever is doing it is the middleman, but hey, I'm no detective. Officer Smith had told me that they have some of the Starlight in the lab and are currently running chemical analysis. I'm honestly really interested in what they may find. Well, I was anyways. I think it's fair to assume at this point that taking Starlight sounds like a very bad idea, right? I mean, clearly, it's not safe by any stretch of the imagination. All that I've learned, they should have been more than enough to stop me from ever thinking about touching it. But it wasn't. Aaron is my best friend, and now that both Daniel and Griffey are gone, I really don't have any others. Aaron has helped me in more ways than I could possibly name here. It may sound corny, but he really is like a brother to me, more so than anybody else on this earth. I suspect grief played a large part in my decision as well. It was stupid, I know, but it was the only thing I could think of to help him. I couldn't just abandon him. I had to know what had happened. I had to find him. I had to understand what Starlight is. Now, this decision wasn't entirely ludicrous on my end. People have actually survived taking it, supposedly anyways. Officer Smith said they are currently holding 2 guys who both claim to have used it. Both of them were lucid and showed very little side effects. Their minds seemed intact, at least to the point that they could coherently hold a conversation. One guy even claimed that he actually enjoyed the experience. That fact gave me hope. The trip up Starlight seems almost like a mental gauntlet. You survive it long enough and it eventually wears off. I'm desperately hoping that is the case at least. I've basically been on house arrest as the investigation into the deaths of Griffey and Daniel are investigated. No ankle monitor though, just an officer stationed outside my parents' house at all times. Despite the police precautions, I managed to get in contact with one of the attendees of the party. His name's Andre and he also goes to my school. I had to basically beg him to come meet me, but eventually he did agree. Andre and I had spoken at school a couple times, but weren't exactly friends. Not enemies either, just associates really. He showed up at my house and after a brief talk with the cop stationed outside, he was allowed inside. He and I had talked a bit, but he really didn't know much about the situation. He did, however, have a bit of Starlight still on him. It was only a tiny amount, maybe equivalent to one small line. I dumped out the baggie and I stared at the sparkly blue powder. I didn't even know if there was enough for it to work, but my 3 friends had taken a similar small amount. I felt a fear that I had never known sink deep into my bones. It was like gravity had increased tenfold and wanted to drag me straight through the floor. Andre seemed to share that fear. "You sure you want to do this, man?" His eyes seemed plastered open. "No, not really." I tried to cover my nervousness with a laugh, but I don't think either of us bought it. I rolled up a $10 bill and I looked at him. "You don't have to stay if you don't want to." Andre's eyes were glossy, and he thought for a second. "Nah, man, someone's gotta be here to babysit." He smiled and we shared a cynical laugh. I took the bill and I leaned down to the powder. Here goes nothing. The burning sensation was intense, like I had just snorted napalm. I recoiled as the blue line vacuumed into my nostril and recoiled from the pain. It was like a colony of fire ants had begun devouring the insides of my skull. It passed surprisingly quickly though, only lasting maybe 30 seconds. And thank God for that too. I wouldn't have been able to handle one more second of it. I leaned back up to my chair and Starlight took complete control. For anyone that's taken minor hallucinogens, like acid or magic mushrooms before, you'll know the feeling. It's not so much hallucinating as it is a change in perspective. You don't see unicorns or dragons flying around. Everything just looks different somehow. It's like your mind is operating on a new level. Walls seem to breathe in and out. Trees and scenery seem to blend into one another. It's like everything is connected. I want you to get those notions out of your head right now, because Starlight is nothing like that. There is no description I can give to properly convey how utterly annihilated any sense of your familiarity will be. People talk about ego death with DMT, and this was ego obliteration. A maelstrom of thoughts, emotions, and concepts struck me like a hurricane, spiraling with my mind and being thrust into an impossible dimension, so far beyond my own comprehension that there is no suitable metaphor. The feeling it induced was one of utter euphoria, an exquisite state of consciousness beyond anything I would have ever thought possible. I felt like every sense I had was drastically improved, like every neuron had been supercharged and every cognitive process within me had been ramped up exponentially by a factor of infinity. I wish that I had the proper words to describe it, but I don't think that they exist. And just imagine being born without any senses whatsoever. A mind alone in a void without taste, touch, sight, smell, or hearing. And then suddenly, all of those things hit you at once and multiply by a trillion. It was beautiful, terrible, and completely overwhelming. It was like being alive for the very first time. I glanced around my bedroom and I tried in vain to digest my newfound capabilities. The first thing that I noticed were my hands. They were completely the same, at least visually. The more I studied them though, the more I started to see them better. It was like I could see every pore upon them, every minuscule scar and imperfection, every single follicle of hair at its root. I looked around my bedroom and I saw every stroke of paint on the walls, every pixel upon the pictures on my desk, every speck of dust that lingered in the air. The more I studied the room, the more that it changed. I saw fragmented images of myself and ex-girlfriend cuddling in bed. I saw me as a child playing with our dog Bailey. I saw Aaron and I playing video games late into the night. I then began to even see the construction workers who had built it. I saw the electrician wiring up the walls, the plumber installing pipes, and the foreman napping outside in his truck. They joked to each other while country music hummed in the background. Mark Canterbrook, Luis Velasquez, Stephen DeBolt, Andrew Hollis, K&M Construction. The names just appeared in my mind. I watched intently as the lives of the men played out before me. I was entranced, watching their individual lives unfold. I saw them struggle, saw them succeed, saw them being born. I had gone too far and suddenly I knew it. I fell out of my chair and I landed on the ground. And that's when I realized that I couldn't feel my body at all. Everything was numb, but more than that, it was like it didn't even exist. There was no feeling of being high or inebriated, no mental impairment, slurred movement, or anything like that. To the complete contrary, I was absolutely coherent in my actions, and not in any way mentally restricted. It was like that was how I always should have been. Like the feeling supplied by the starlight was more real than reality itself. My vision appeared slightly darker than before, with things looking like I was viewing the world through a vibrant yet dark pair of sunglasses. There was no pain within me, and the only physical sensation at all came from the center of my forehead. Right between my eyes and a half-inch upward, I felt a slight tingling sensation. It wasn't uncomfortable though. In fact, it was quite soothing. Like some unseen tiny angel was gently caressing my third eye in a circular motion. I then noticed Andre standing over me. His eyes were wide and he spoke words that I couldn't understand. I could feel his elevated heartbeat and the blood flowing through his veins, even the thoughts moving from neuron to neuron in his brain. I had almost completely forgotten that he was there. I was perfectly capable of seeing him, better than ever before as a matter of fact. But at the same time, it was like he had just become a part of the background, like my mind just wasn't concerned with his existence. And the more I looked at him, the more I saw parts of his life flash before me as well. I had to look away to stop from falling into another rabbit hole. He said something else, but it was like he was mumbling underwater. "Dude, this is freaking crazy." I spoke the words and I heard myself pronounce them. Andre seemed to understand. There was fear in his expression, but no confusion. He understood me, but I couldn't understand him. Something then darted in the window behind him. I sprung to my feet and I stared towards it, but I saw nothing. I didn't say anything to Andre. I just left the room and I went outside. And the sun had just begun to set when I entered the backyard. My fenced-in backyard was bathed in a crimson glow. In the sky, I saw things zipping and zooming around. Glowing things in shadows swirled and shifted across the horizon. There was a pattern to them. There was a pattern to everything. To the way the grass flowed in the breeze, the way the water dripped from the fence. I don't know how long I stood there like that, but when I finally snapped out of the trance, I realized that the world had gone dark. I looked back to the sky and I saw that there was nothing there. There were no stars, no moon, no anything aside from an endless night. Behind the fence, I saw something duck out of sight. For the first time, I felt a bit nervous, and I took a step back towards the house. Andre had already left by that point, but I only realized it much later. I pressed my back against the house and I attempted to calm myself. Something then fell over the fence. It was small, probably only a foot in height. It was humanoid, with a bulbous head and stubby little arms and legs. Its body was grayish like a shadow made out of smoke. Two large black orbs sat in place of its eyes, but aside from that it had no facial features. It waddled as it walked, and reminded me of a child's doll that had come to life. It then paused, and its large cranium turned in my direction. We just stared at each other for a couple of seconds. Suddenly the little guy leapt in the air a few inches, its stubby arms wiggling around. It then scurried over to me clumsily, falling over once on its way. Part of me wanted to run, but another part of me found the thing strangely adorable. The way it moved was just so silly, like a toddler excitedly chasing after a puppy. It's a weird comparison, but the thing reminded me almost of Gur from Invader Zim, if anybody remembers that show. I stayed still as the curious entity came closer. It got within a few feet and it stared up at me. I felt my heart relax a bit, and the awkward little guy began moving around and wiggling. It looked like he was trying to dance. Suddenly I saw another silhouette tumble over the fence. It was another one. It came scurrying right over and joined the first. The first turned as the other arrived, and the two seemed overjoyed by the sight of one another. Both of them started wiggling around, and I found myself laughing as they got close. I then noticed on top of the fence were several more pairs of black eyes staring at me. One by one they came tumbling over the fence, and waddling over to join the others. In no time, there was at least a dozen of them all congregated around me, dancing and playing with each other. They were all the same matte gray color, but they were clearly distinct from one another. Some were slightly taller, while others were pudgier or skinnier. I knelt to them and the first one approached me curiously. I don't know why, but I extended a hand out to the little creature. Its head cocked to the side, and it cautiously came closer. Its little arms reached out and it touched my hand. The feeling was as smooth as silk against my fingertips, and the sensation was soft, almost doughy. I no longer felt afraid of it. The rest of the group eyed me curiously, but then suddenly a noise caught their attention. It was like the blurb of a horn far in the distance. Suddenly the little guys scurried back towards where they had come from, beckoning me to follow them. The first one waved me forward, and with my barrier of skepticism lifted, I followed. They all began to gather around the small cottonwood tree in the corner of my yard. I got within a few feet, and suddenly they paused all of their antics. Almost in unison, they all looked skyward and froze at the sight of something above them. Dread suddenly returned to me, and I followed their gaze up. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first. Several jagged points all lined around a semicircle. It was moving quickly towards me. Instincts took over and I leapt backwards out of the way. And that's when I first saw it. A massive, serpentine creature with a mouth of jagged, razor-sharp teeth. Its jaws snapped shut and I managed to just barely avoid it. It was black as a shadow, and its form seemed to shift and quiver about. Two enormous white orbs sat atop its head, and other flailing extremities moved around behind it. The wretched python reared back, staring towards me with an unrivaled malfeasance. It was enormous, with its long neck standing high above the houses around. Its wiggling appendages struck the ground around it, and it began pulling itself closer towards me. It sifted right through the fence, and not damaging or disturbing anything around it. I took off running, screaming bloody murder as the abomination chased me. I glanced back as I hurdled the fence to see the little creature staring motionlessly at me as the enormous snake pursued me. I tore down the neighborhood street and ran far away from the house. The cops usually stationed outside of my house were long gone. The gigantic python sifted right through my house, unimpeded by its presence and driven down by an otherworldly hunger. Luckily for me, it was quite slow, and after running for several blocks I saw no sign of it. That didn't stop me from running though, as I saw glimpses of other shadowy beasts all around, all of them appearing different than a serpent, and all seemed to stir at my presence and give chase. I ran from the neighborhood and into the field that stands across the main road from my house. I finally had to stop as my lungs threatened to burst within me. Frantically, I glanced around the vicinity. The long flowing grass waved around beneath me in the night breeze. The scattered trees were surrounded by an aura, which embedded and flowed from one to the next. I was suddenly completely relaxed, but I knew that I wasn't safe. In the distance, I saw something else. A gigantic creature sat motionless in the field, about 50 feet away. It wasn't like the snake thing though. It looked almost like a gigantic human, sitting on its haunches and appearing to shuffle around in the dirt. I began backing away from it, when its head quickly snapped in my direction. We stared for a brief moment, when suddenly the thing stood upright. It had to be at least 20 feet tall. Its head suddenly twitched backwards at an angle which would have surely killed a normal human. The night air was then accosted by its wail. It sounded almost like a foghorn. It was an ungodly sound, not like anything reminiscent of a human being. I didn't stick around to see anything more. I began to run as the others similar to the first rose up from the field. They began lumbering towards me, and I sprinted away. Several more minutes of running ensued, until once again I was forced to stop as exhaustion overtook my adrenaline. I dropped to my knees and I panted heavily on the side of a small incline. I could still see the humanoid things in the distance coming closer, but luckily they also were pretty slow. Their heads and arms dangled lifelessly as they sauntered towards me. I moved to the top of the hill, and I crested over to see a large body of water on the other side. I didn't recognize the place, but looking back now, I realized it was the same reservoir that I had mentioned earlier. The one where Marcus had been found. Also on the opposite side of the reservoir is Aaron's house. The water was calm, motionless like it was made entirely of glass. My heart then nearly sprang out from my chest as I saw what was beneath the surface. Dozens of faces stared back at me. The people there weren't shadowy like all the others though. They looked normal, with people of every age, gender, and ethnicity staring back at me. None of them so much as blinked. We just stared at each other for the longest time, with my soul filling to the brim with terror. I didn't recognize any of the people below the water. They appeared to be elderly people of at least 90 years old, and children as young as 5. A new noise then split the night, like a trumpet but at a much lower octave. As if somebody had flipped a switch, the people beneath the surface began to panic. They wrestled about, knocking and slamming into one another, as they tried desperately to breach the surface. I saw people struck by fists, elbows, and everything else as the madness grew. An old man was cold-cocked by a younger man, who tried climbing on him to reach the surface. Another man was torn apart, with several others ripping his head and arms clean from his body. A young girl fell and was trampled to a pulp by the stampeding others, who spared no thought to her well-being. It was horrifying to watch, and as my gaze drifted out to the endless chaos, I saw what they were afraid of. A hulking creature was coming towards me, walking directly on the surface of the lake with multiple limbs, and the way it moved reminded me of a tarantula. I thought that's what it was at first, a massive arachnid of some kind. It had way too many arms for that though, and as it drew nearer, I saw that its legs were in fact human arms. Dozens of them, unpaired and asymmetrical, gyrating about as the thing hauled itself onward. It then quickened its pace, with the arms quickly propelling it towards me. I began to run, but the thing was way too fast. It reached me before I even had a chance to descend back down the bank. It seized me with multiple massive hands that held me tight. Its touch was freezing on my skin. It pulled me close and it reared me up. On the underside of its torso, I saw about a dozen human heads all gibbering, laughing and crying. I screamed and tried desperately to break free, but I never would have escaped. The thing dragged me backwards towards the lake and I tried in vain to break free. It stepped back onto the lake, with me firmly in the grip of about 5 of its many arms. The same trumpet sound then blared once more, and the thing slammed me down into the lake. A system shock hit me, as a bone-chilling sensation colder than anything I had ever felt before infused my body. I spun in the water trying to get my bearings and reach the surface. It was so incredibly dark, with even my abductor no longer being visible. I blew bubbles to try and follow them to the surface, but found them split and travel in multiple directions. I don't even know how to describe this next part. It was like being in the center of a typhoon. I was thrown aimlessly around an internal body of water, spinning and flipping with zero control. I lost all sense of reason and logic, and felt that death was imminent. I felt something grab me, but I could not see it. Just as my lungs were prepared to give out, I was thrusted outward and propelled from the obsidian seas. I landed hard back on the land. Oxygen sweeter than sugar once again filled my lungs, and the relief was indescribable. I gasped and I took a moment to catch my breath. The sounds of birds chirping echoed about, and the environment seemed suddenly serene. I lifted my head from the mud and I found I was not where I had been. It was suddenly light outside, but I saw no sun in the sky. Around me sprawled a massive forest, with trees extending hundreds of feet above me. I rose to my feet and I glanced around. The body of water I had crawled out of was only a small stream, maybe 6 inches deep. I have no idea how that was possible. I found a trail soon after and I began to walk further into the forest. Before long, I came across a curious sight. There was a large wall in front of me, with a gate in the center. It appeared as a kind of white soapstone, pearl coloration with runes inscribed into the foundation. It had to be at least 20 feet tall. There was a large plaque over the gateway, inscribed with something in a foreign language. It almost looked like Sanskrit, but it looked much older. It was beautiful, and I felt as though I was being drawn inside. I crossed through the gateway and I found a massive sprawling expanse of foliage and plants within. There were trees with trunks as thick as a house, fruits and vegetables of immense proportion. I saw apples the size of my head, squash the size of cars, cornstalks 20 feet high, and grapes as large as softballs. It was all so surreal, so peaceful. Suddenly I felt as though I hadn't a worry in the world, like the ghastly beasts that had pursued me were no longer a threat. The words above the gate branded into my mind, and suddenly a name manifested on my tongue. Eden. High above in the scarlet skies, I saw something drifting down from the heavens. It appeared like an imposing humanoid creature, dressed in alabaster robes and garments that streamed behind it like tassels in the breeze. 6 massive feathered wings guided its descent, and 4 arms lined its torso. There was no fear at the sight of it, there was only wonder. It touched down before me, its 2 left arms cradling a book, while the 2 right held a sword made of fire. It had to be at least 30 feet tall. Its face was split down the middle, with the left side appearing female and the right side male. The creature leered down at me, eyes glowing white. I felt so insignificant standing before it, like David before Goliath. Only I had no hope of ever overcoming such an entity, nor would I have even desired it. The creature then rose the massive flaming sword and pointed the blade towards me. Its gaze turned to the book in its left arms and then back at me. "You do not belong." A chorus of thousands of voices composed its tone. The sound was booming but not threatening. Before I even had a chance to react, a flame sprouted from its sword and engulfed me. I felt my existence burned into dust, and my mind stripped from body and soul. I don't remember much after that. The next thing I knew, I awoke in a hospital bed to the sight of my family at my side. They breathed a sigh of relief and asked me for answers, but I could give very little. I said nothing about the Starlight. I had been found by a local farmer in his field. I was naked almost 30 miles away from home. I was missing for almost 3 days. I have no idea how I got to where they found me. My trip had ended and I had returned to a mostly sober state of mind. Only I'm not. I know what I have seen may seem ridiculous, but because of it, I can never be the same. My experience has shown me that there are things so far removed from myself that I could never fully understand them. I could live 1,000 lifetimes and never find the words to properly explain the sheer profundity of what I have learned. After being shown what I am capable of, and having it subsequently ripped away as I sobered up, I feel incomplete. I feel like I can never be entirely whole again. No matter what I do or where I go, I can never forget that feeling. That's the worst part of all of this. I know what Starlight is now. God doesn't want us here. Aaron's cryptic words made sense now. Starlight is not a drug. It's a gateway. It is the forbidden fruit, and perhaps just pieces of it. A catalyst to show humans things that they were never meant to see, to take them to places they were never meant to go and teach them things that they were never meant to learn. There is no going back from it now. Once you have tasted the sweet nectar of what Starlight has to offer, nothing else will ever matter. You will be forever damned to wither in torment from the knowledge of how incomplete and infinitesimal you truly are. This is my warning to you. No matter how enticing the sights may seem, or how alluring the curiosity is, you must resist. It will forever change you. Aaron is still gone, and I don't expect that to change. He's out there somewhere, lost somewhere between our world and the countless others that surround us. I know he's looking for her too. I don't know where Starlight comes from, but I plan on finding out. Whatever the cost, wherever I have to go, no price is too great. There is only one thing left to do, and so I have to get going. I have to find Starlight. I have to get more